Welcome, everyone, to the Vendetta Sports Media Daily Show. Today is September 12th. I'm Jack Sabin. Here with me today is Matt Hannafin. And today we are going to be pretty much talking about week one of the NFL season. I know a lot of us are happy and we're very excited to have NFL back. I know a lot of us also didn't do anything on Sunday, and we're probably not very productive on account of watching football for 8 straight hours. And now we're here to kind of digest it all, go over what happened. But before we get too far, Matt, how you doing today?
Doing good, man. I'm doing good. I remember I saw it was either like a TikTok like on like an Instagram reel a little while ago, and it was like when you know the sound that comes on. It was like the Sunday Night Football
Yeah,
like theme song, and it was just like when you have like 5 essays due
yeah,
like, the next day or something like that. Like it's football season and school season.
yep. You hear that Sunday night football theme song, and then you just immediately realize, oh, I'm gonna be up until
Yeah.
3 a.m. today or
Good thing I'm not in
tonight.
school anymore, but so I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, that was definitely
Yeah, I
something
got one more year, but
over and
I've
over
been
again.
better at starting to try and just get all my shit done before Sunday, so I don't got to worry about that.
Wise. But no,
But
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good.
well, we always love to hear that. But our football week, as we all know, first got started on Thursday night. Was the first game of the season. And the reigning Super Bowl champions, the Kansas City Chiefs, were playing the Detroit Lions, and to the surprise of many, the Detroit Lions actually ended up pulling off the win in what truly a dogfight kind of a game. Not a whole lot of offense. Both teams are kind of gritting and grinding. Very typical for Dan Campbell type football. But what were kind of some of your main takeaways from that game, Matt?
Well, I mean, it's always unfortunate when when one of the best pass catchers in the league gets ruled out. I mean, I know it was kind of not a last minute injury because I think it was like a couple days before the actual game started where he got injured in practice, and they ruled him out. It was precautionary. I mean, the 10 days of rest, I would have expected them to rule out. Same thing with like the Chris Jones situation, which fortunately for him, that's situated now. But I mean, just from like it was brutal. I mean, for Mahomes, I mean, obviously, I thought Mahomes looked fine. But like to his standard, he looked below average. But that's because he was throwing to
Kadarius Toney.
Darius Tony and um, Rasheed Rice and Noah Gray. Like it wasn't obviously the stable of pass catch. I mean, obviously Travis Kelsey's like one in terms of like his ability as a
Yeah,
tight end, and it
he's
felt
the
like
best
in
tight end in the
multiple third down
NFL.
situations and just long down a distance, he wasn't able to have that safety net in Travis Kelsey. And obviously, like there were definitely drops that on not I don't want to say perfectly thrown balls, but balls that were accurate enough and that were catchable enough to
Yeah, pretty much all of them were catchable.
yeah. And then like also just the David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs situation was just weird to me. Like it didn't really feel like it at the time until you looked at the box score at the end that Montgomery had 21 carries compared to Gibbs' 8. And Gibbs looked, at least to me, like the substantially better running back. And I think most of those carries came in the first half for Gibbs. Like he really didn't get many touches in the second half. I mean, Goff looked fine, 253 passing yards, 1 touchdown. Amon-Ra looked good. Josh Reynolds looked good. I was impressed as the game went on with Laporta, the rookie tight end, who I think like could have some sort of an impact outside of St. Brown. I mean, Marvin Jones did not have a good game at all. He had a few really bad drops early in the game, and I don't think Goff really threw to him much after that. But it was just like it's a normal Thursday night game in terms of like this is just a rock fight. And I'll probably be saying that more often throughout this, but those are, I guess, my initial takeaways. I mean, Mahomes just didn't have the pass catchers. They lost by 1 against a team that is favored to win their division. And so maybe we look back on this in week 10 being like, oh, wow, this is actually not a terrible loss for Kansas City. But I don't think it's fair to react one way or the other for either team.
Yeah, no, I definitely think the Lions will end up being a good team, and I wouldn't be surprised if they end up as a playoff team. But I mean, yeah, kind of harp on what you said. I think probably the biggest takeaway for me for the Chiefs was that they need another playmaker on the
Mhm.
outside. Like even once Kelsey comes back, I think it's still evident that they need somebody on the outside who can be some sort of a threat. Because Kelsey's great and all, I think part of what makes him so great is when this offense is, firing on all cylinders
Mhm.
and Mahomes is able to stretch the ball down the field, make those deep throws, get those big plays, force the defense to kind of play back and respect that. And then that's kind of usually when Kelsey comes in and just starts feasting because then he starts getting favorable matchups and teams can't start focusing all their defensive resources
Mhm.
on Kelsey. So, I mean, I think they definitely need to bring in, I don't know who that is at this point. I mean, it still is week one,
Mike
maybe.
Evans.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, that's the name everyone keeps saying. That would be amazing for the Chiefs. I hope to God they don't do that, but that would be a great move for them. And then,
I
yeah, on the
also was
Lions,
surprised about the usage from Pacheco. I thought he wasn't being used as much. I mean, we saw towards the second half of last year, I think part of that was due to Clyde being injured. But it felt like, I don't know what the snap count looked like in the end, but it felt like it's almost like a 50-50 split. And I thought Pacheco was going to be used a lot more. He only had 8 carries, 23 yards.
well, yeah,
I think,
Clyde was the
yeah.
starting running back technically.
Yeah.
That was the last person. I would have expected
Yeah.
either Pacheco or McKinnon to be
Mhm.
out there ahead of,
Yeah.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So, I mean, I don't know if all of a sudden they saw something in camp that they love and he's going to be getting snaps, but then it seemed like he kind of disappeared towards the end of the game. Clyde Edwards, that is. So yeah, I mean, I think overall in week one there was some weird snap countage or some snap usage with running back specifically. We'll talk about that later with other teams like the Eagles
Yeah.
with,
The Eagles had a weird one.
Gainwell
We'll
and
get to that.
Swift. Yeah, we'll get to that later. And obviously the Lions with Jameer Gibbs and Montgomery because Gibbs. I mean, you said that you felt like the snap count was a lot closer, and I think part of that was just because Gibbs looked so good and
He
explosive
did.
in the limited snaps he did get.
Yeah. He
So yeah,
looked a lot more explosive. And like the thing that I like with Gibbs is like, I mean, I don't want to say he's a small running back, but it felt like every time he was getting hit, his legs were still moving. Like it felt like he was really. I mean, I think he's smaller height wise. I think he's a more muscular build, but also he was just one of like the fastest players on the field whenever he was touching the ball, which I think could be a really valuable weapon as the season goes on. I mean, they could like jet sweeps with him. They can use him all sorts of these different packages with him, but like he was the quickest guy on the field, it felt like, but he was also like every time he was getting hit, he just felt like defenders were just bouncing off him and he was just keeping his legs turning. And I was really impressed with just it was tough to bring him down. He wasn't an easy person to tackle at all for more reasons than just one. And it just felt like I was just never impressed with Montgomery in Chicago. And that's also just like he was playing behind a bad
yeah, he
offensive
didn't
line,
look
but just
bad.
like from an explosiveness standpoint, he was just
Yeah, he
never
definitely
really that
didn't look.
explosive. And
Yeah,
so
he
it was
definitely
hard
didn't
for
look
him to,
bad
to get
on
those
Thursday.
big games. I kind of left with the same impression, aside from like maybe a couple different runs, including that touchdown run. He doesn't have that burst or explosiveness to I think warrant 21 carries in a game.
Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that, and I think over the next few weeks we'll start to see that snap count starts to even out, and maybe even Gibbs starts to get more carries. But I think now teams are just, I mean, they understand the lifespan of running back, so it's maybe just a kind of thing where you just want to try and save as many of those
Mhm.
snaps as you can early on in the year. Because yeah, I think Gibbs definitely, by the midway point of the season will probably be, the main every down running back. But I don't think Monty necessarily looked horrible. Like I still think he'll serve a role on that Lions team.
Mhm.
Like even if Gibbs becomes the main back, I think Montgomery could kind of play that Jamal Williams role. Probably not quite as good as Williams did. I don't think anyone really could, but
Yeah,
I think he can sort of fulfill that role.
agreed.
But all right, moving on to our next game. getting into the 10 a.m. window on Sunday. We can start with the Falcons and Panthers game. It was a somewhat exciting game for NFL
PU.
fans, at
This
least
game
in
was
the aspect
gross.
of Bryce Young, the rookie out of Alabama, was getting his first start. But yeah, I think Matt's kind of already said enough about it. This game was very very unentertaining. I mean, it was a Falcons win, and anytime the Falcons win, it's going to be a boring game in which
Yeah.
a million handoffs occurred, and that's pretty much what happens. I mean, I don't think I personally have really too many big takeaways from this game. I mean, Desmond Ritter had 50 completions for 12 yards.
Yeah. I looked at one point. I was actually no. This was one of the games I was more locked into because I was just curious and I wanted to see how Bryce Young would do in his first start. I don't want to say I'm bullish on Atlanta, but I think I'm more bullish than the consensus on them this year. I think they actually could win that division, which is not really saying that much if I'm just
Anyone
saying
could.
but like I think I looked at the screen at one point. Ritter was like 6 for 6 with like 11 passing yards.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was just like I was like, wait, I missed. I know at one point like he was
negative
like 3 for
12.
3 with like negative 12 or something. And I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
If
neither
I'm
did
just
I. I
being
just saw
honest.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Also,
mean,
bad day if you had any Drake London fantasy stock. I actually do have some Drake London stock, and he had 0 catches for 0 yards. So
yeah, I mean, really just having stock in any Falcons pass catcher at least for the next year or two just seems moot. They just do not pass the ball enough, and whenever they do, most of the time it's going to the running backs. I mean, Bijan Robinson was their leading receiver, and he had double that of the next. He had 6 receptions, and then Algier, the backup running back, was tied with Mac Hollins for 3 receptions. It's just like
Bijan
that's
looked really good though.
yeah. I mean, Bijan looked really good. I got some fantasy stock in him. I'm doing a league with some guys in my fraternity, just some dumb normal PPR league, and I had to like auto draft most of my team because I was at work, but Bijan was like one of the like 2 picks I got to make.
Hey, listen,
But
that's pretty good.
on the Panther side, I know a lot of people were excited to see Bryce Young's debut, and I mean to put it nicely, it was not very good. I mean, 20 for 38, 146 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks to give him a QBR of 14 and a half and a 48.8 for his ratings. Just overall not very good. He looked a little uncomfortable at times out there. And obviously, I think part of that is just his Panthers team isn't very good. And I think a lot of people going into this season maybe were kind of overhyping the Panthers a little bit with some of the moves they made. But I think it's still just clear at the end of the day that this Panthers team isn't going to be very good.
Yeah, I mean Frank Reich has also just as historically as a coach has gotten off to slow starts when he was in Indianapolis. That offensive line, I mean, I know like Atlanta doesn't really have much of a pass rush, but their offensive line, Carolina's, I mean, is just not good. Very good debut for Jesse Bates in a Falcons uniform, though I must say, in the defensive end. Forced 3 turnovers. I think he had like a pick or 2. And so, I mean, listen, an impressive debut for him. But
And he was Bryce Young's favorite receiver.
yeah. But like, I mean, I'm not expecting Bryce. I wasn't expecting Bryce to come out of the gate swinging. Again, just with like some of the pass catch, like it's one of the worst like receiving pass catching units in the entire league. And it doesn't help when you don't have good skill position in the backfield. Miles Sanders is fine.
Yeah, he's good.
Fine. Like it's not something I'm incredibly high on, not something I guess I'm tremendously low on, but it's just like they don't have the best collection of skill position players when you combine that with a bad offensive line. It's going to make life a little bit difficult.
And a rookie quarterback, yeah.
Especially to start a season when you're a rookie quarterback. even against like a bad Falcon, like I don't think this Falcons defense is anything to write home about at all.
No.
But like they at least did enough to get the job done and force a couple turnovers late, or at least not late, but throughout the game. But I think my biggest takeaway was Bijan looked really good. Algier looked almost even better.
Yeah.
Like a watchability standpoint. I mean, he had what 15 carries for like 75 yards or whatever it was, 2 touchdowns. Like,
Yeah.
he had a really good game. Bijan, that touchdown that he scored where he juked out the defender,
3 people.
So I mean, that's going to be fun, at least from like. I remember I said on the NFL draft episode, or at least the live stream that we did after the fact, it was Trey, myself, Garrett, and I think was it Jackson was on it? Maybe it was like I know Jackson was on throughout it, but like we were talking about like this Falcons pick, and it was just like this is such an Arthur Smith pick in terms of just like we're gonna spoon feed our running backs.
They have an identity. I'll give them that.
And like that's just how they're gonna play. And I mean, obviously helps protect, it helps ease the pressure off Ritter a little bit, but even then, like, it's Desmond Ritter. Like, I don't know if we're like, like
he's not moving the needle.
Respectfully, it's just like, okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, overall, I don't think there's too much more to harp on regarding this game. I don't think any of us were necessarily too surprised with this outcome. Bryce Young, still young, still a rookie, going to need some time to develop, I think. The Falcons, if you play them, get ready to stop the run.
Yeah.
You do that, you got a shot to win. But moving on to our next 10 o'clock window game was one of the more surprising scores of the day, and that was the Cleveland Browns put in a whooping to the Cincinnati Bengals, and even more surprisingly than just whooping them was holding their offense to a measly 3 points. I mean, I guess when I first started suspecting something was when I was watching Red Zone, and they were just like not showing this game at all. I just like wasn't seeing it on Red Zone like at all. And I'm all like, that's kind of weird. I figured this would be, kind of a higher scoring game, or at least a game where there's some offense. And they just like never showing it. And then all of a sudden they're showing it. And it's like, oh, the Browns, we're up 2 scores and the Bengals have 60 yards of offense.
Yeah. No, that's really how it went. It was just like bad weather. Joe Burrow obviously didn't really have much of a training camp at all. He got the extension, good for him, but coming off of a training camp injury, Deshaun, I don't really know if I really didn't know what to expect out of Deshaun in week 1, even though he had a truncated season last season. And so like it was really just like a game of the two defenses just back and forth. I mean, like obviously Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith were just teeing off on Burrow. It felt like every other snap. At least from the snaps that I saw, like you just felt like he was under heat so much, and obviously he didn't have much time in the pocket, and he was having to throw the ball away a lot. T. Higgins, if you had T. Higgins fantasy stock, I apologize.
Put anybody on this Bengals offense.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, Chubb was good. I mean, obviously once Cleveland got out to a lead, I mean, their first touchdown game didn't come until I think like late in the second quarter. Like as soon as they got on the board and they got the lead, it was just like we're just going to give it to Chubb and rely on him. Jerome Ford was, but like Chubb still looked good. He still had over 100 yards rushing. I mean, Deshaun was missing throws, at least in the beginning of the game, but it felt like he found his rhythm more in like the final 2.5 quarters. He was pushing the ball downfield a little bit more when you had the opportunity to, but other than that, it was just like a mucky 24-3 kind of. It's not even like rock fight's the wrong word. It was just like a blank game.
Yeah, it was just kind of it was like the Browns won by a lot, but it still just kind of seemed like a sloppy game overall. It just seemed like
Yeah,
the Bengals were just like really, really bad. Like
yeah.
I don't quite think the Browns are that good, and I know the Bengals aren't that bad. And I mean, the offensive line, kind of like you said, that's seemingly always been an issue for the Bengals. They've
Mhm.
tried addressing it, and I mean that was one of the main things that kind of neutralized the Bengals offense was that defensive line from the Browns, and not just in terms of the pass rush, but in terms of the run game too. Because I mean, like you said, it was really cold there. I believe it was like raining. I
Yeah,
don't think it was
it
raining the
was
whole
raining.
time, but it was like off and on. And so usually in games like that, you want to be able to win on the ground. You want to be able to run the ball effectively, win in the trenches, just because it's harder, to air the ball out when it's colder and raining like that. And the Bengals just really weren't able to do that. I mean, it seemed like they kind of tried to early on, and Mixon just couldn't get it going. And then the Bengals kind of did what they seemingly do a little bit too much, in my opinion, and they just kind of give up on the run game entirely. And
Mhm.
just like, all right, we're going to live and die by Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. It's like, I mean, yeah, that's definitely worked out for them plenty of times, but in a game and situation like that where the conditions aren't really in your favor, the Browns clearly have a defensive scheme that's working to neutralize your pass game. It just would have made more sense to me if they kind of at least stuck to the run game a little bit more. Because I mean, what Mixon finished with like 12, 13 carries.
It was something like that, yeah. And like Cleveland had one of the worst run defenses in the league last year. I mean, I know they upgraded in their interior defensive line with Dalvin Tomlinson and a couple other guys, but for the most part, this was just kind of a new defensive line put together. I mean, I don't think Mixon was that bad either. I just don't. I'm kind of with you. I just don't think he got many touches, or at least as much as you
Yeah,
want him in this type of environment. Like, I don't think he was terrible at all. And so I think they probably should have, especially with the banged up Burrow. Like, you would expect them to kind of run the ball a little bit more, but they
yeah,
didn't.
and I mean, and like we said, I mean, the Browns didn't score their touchdown, until relatively late. So I mean, the Bengals,
Mhm,
even though they only, had 3 points for the longest time, they were still in the game for a while. So it wasn't like, they were racing against the clock the entire time and had to, start airing it out.
mhm,
It was like, they still had plenty of time to, overcome that deficit while running, their offense and still running the rock.
mhm.
But yeah, like I said, I think a lot of us were surprised by the outcome of this game. But I think for the Bengals, we can just more so chalk it up to just some week one jitters, week one sluggishness. I
I
am
think
sure
like
they will be
for
bouncing
them,
back.
something to file away is like this is just since Burrow's gotten there, they've just started slow. Like I
Yeah, that's
remember
another good
last year,
point.
Burrow threw like 3 or 4 picks against Pittsburgh in the
Oh,
opening
he
game.
did in week one. I do remember
Yeah,
that.
like they've struggled. I think 2 years ago they beat Minnesota, so maybe not. But like two 2 years, like they're just a team that historically starts slow. Um, at least in recent memory, and like I think a part of that has been like Burrow has been banged up practically every year of his career in the offseason to some extent, at
Yeah,
least, and doesn't have a whole lot of reps under his belt heading into the season in the preseason and in training camp. And so, like last year, I think they started like 0-2 or 1-3 or something like that. And then they got the wagon rolling a little bit, and that's when they kind of took off. And obviously, they're a perennial Super Bowl contender, or at least perennial AFC contender to make it out. Um, and so, like, it's not week one. There's a lot of overreaction. Check out our overreactions post on vendettasportsmedia.com that we just put up. But just in like the broad sense, like I don't think it's fair to overreact in terms of like a negative Bengals direction, or maybe even a positive Browns direction. Like maybe this new Browns defense is really that good. Like Jim Schwartz, I don't think again he called a good game on Sunday. Uh, this is Darius Smith impact that he didn't show in the latter portions of when he was in Green Bay or when he was in Minnesota last year. he kind of looked like he did in like 2017, 2018, 2019. Like he looked really, really good. So did Myles Garrett, because Myles Garrett's Myles Garrett. Like that's just who Myles Garrett is. But like maybe this new defense for Cleveland is actually really good, but we'll figure that out in the coming weeks, week 2, 3, so on and so forth. But I don't think it's fair to overreact in terms of like the ceiling and the sky is falling for the Bengals. Like it's just not. Give it time. Obviously, probably give it 3 or 4 weeks before we really can start evaluating. All right, this team is like bad or good or whatever. Like they're not going to be bad, I don't think at all. But it just give us like a few weeks, maybe like a month and a half before we can really like truly evaluate this team.
Yep, that's very true. I mean, some teams start off slow. Niners are another team that comes to mind. Some teams just need a little bit of time to get going. And sports media, people love to overreact and make mountains out of molehills, but
Yeah.
we over here try not to do that too much. But that brings us into our next game in the 10 o'clock window, which involved another rookie quarterback, Anthony Richardson for the Colts, playing the Jaguars. Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence were able to win by a score of 31-21. Wasn't, I'd say, by any means a bad game. I think my biggest takeaway was that Anthony Richardson actually looked good. And in my opinion, looked like the best quarterback out of this rookie class, probably by a pretty decent amount. We already talked about how bad Bryce Young played. And I wouldn't say Stroud was necessarily bad. He's just in such a horrible situation there that I feel like you can't even hold it against him. But Richardson, for the most part, I think he showed off, his athletic traits and kind of showed people why he shot up draft board so late on the ground. I think as a passer, he showed that he still, can polish that up a little bit. Everyone kind of knew that was the aspect of his game that was going to need some work, just as a pure pocket passer, and the accuracy at times was a little iffy, but for the most part, he used his legs when he needed to. Picked up a lot of big first downs on the ground. I'd say really the only knock I had on him was the guy just needs to learn how to slide, because he took a couple hits, and he took one in near the goal line. I forget who laid the hit, but he took a big hit, like trying to dive for a touchdown. And I was just like, one of those hits where you watch it and you just cringe. It's just like, ooh, I felt that hit.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I don't disagree with you. I was actually like, I mean, it was obviously Steichen was trying to set things up for him offensively, to where he was trying to put him in the best situation to succeed. And some of those were like getting him in second and third in manageable situations, and then allowing him to use his feet to get that first down. I mean, he's a big guy. He's big physically, and so he's another guy that's just hard to bring down for a different reason than Jahmyr Gibbs. But also, like, I mean, the accuracy, I think, is always going to be a question with him. The accuracy, some of the decision making when it comes to like if he can't make that first and second read, and if he's going through his progressions, what is he going to do? Is he going to duck his head down and run? Like, is he going to get happy feet back there? Like, what exactly is going to happen? I mean, I want to say the Jaguars pass rush is super great, but it felt like there were times where I did see him where he didn't, when he was going through his reads and he got past that second read or third read, there was some sort of panic in there, but I don't know if that's something you're ever going to weed out of him, at least at this stage of his career. I mean, remember, this guy only made 13 starts at Florida, has not played much football at all,
No.
At least with game reps, but he did look good. He looked more impressive than I thought he would be. And like, that's something that, yeah, he had that bad interception, I think, like in the fourth quarter, late in the game.
Yeah, he just didn't see that.
Yeah,
that safety sitting down there.
Yeah, but like, I was probably more impressed with him as a passer than I expected him to be week one. Even against kind of like, I don't want to say subpar, but just kind of average Jaguars secondary. But like this, I was definitely impressed. I mean, obviously I want to see them. It's hard to get the ground game going without uh, Jonathan Taylor, but that's something I guess I want to see them do more, at least to make sure if they're able to continue to put Richardson in those short down and distance situations to make it more manageable for him. But other than that, yeah, I was pretty impressed with at least him for it being week one.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Richardson, as you said, had a lot of question marks going into this year. I mean, the limited game time in college at Florida, a lot of people just didn't think he'd be ready to take over as an NFL quarterback. But I mean, I think at least through week one, which is very, very, very small sample size, I mean, he at least showed that he can hold his own. And I mean, yeah, he's not going to look perfect. No rookie ever is, but I think if he can just kind of show a consistent ability to be able to throw the ball and be somewhat accurate, he can be a dangerous quarterback. It's not like he ever has to be elite at he's never going to have to be an elite ball placer in terms of accuracy or whatnot. Like he has the athletic traits and the running ability to where if he can just become as above average in terms of accuracy, he can be so deadly for this Colts team just with his pure ability to use his legs and extend drives. And then I mean on the Jaguars side, I haven't talked too much about them, but in all reality, nothing really stood out to me too much from them. Trevor Lawrence looked good, 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean, I kind of expected him to more or less have his way with this Colts defense. ETN continued to show his versatility. Then Tank Bigsby was vulturing a lot of his touchdowns, but I think he showed his presence as a goal line back. So, I think this Jags team, they'll be favorites to win their division at this point, a division that's pretty open.
At least they should be, yeah.
So, I mean,
They
at
should be
this point, it
favored.
seems like it's Trevor Lawrence's, division to lose.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably discuss what we saw with Tennessee later, but also just another PU game from Tennessee. But from Jacksonville, I mean, like it's been over 600 days since Calvin Ridley last played a football game, and he didn't look like he missed a beat.
Yeah.
Like he was phenomenal. Over 100 yards catch and 1 touchdown. He was, I mean, as expected, he was Lawrence's top target, but like he did not miss a single damn beat at all. Zay Jones was also like impressed me a little bit. I didn't expect him to get the volume that he got. It looked like they were using him a lot on like the outside instead of Christian Kirk, which I thought was interesting. Christian Kirk, I think he's probably moving back to the slot a little bit. I mean, Evan Ingram looked solid. I thought ETN looked pretty spry. I mean, this game was close until like the very end. Like, I don't think a 10-point game it's kind of a poor indicator on how this game went. Like Jacksonville was in trouble at certain points, and I don't think that should be ignored. But obviously, I mean, again, Jacksonville found a way, like they did at least a lot in the second half of last season in some of these close, tight games. But just from like a takeaway perspective, Calvin Ridley was awesome. Like again, I just can't say enough. He looked really, really good. And I mean, so did Lawrence, and so did their other skill position guys. And but I was very impressed with Ridley.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're definitely right. He did not look like he missed a beat at all. Wouldn't have been able to tell me that he had missed any time based on how he looked. But moving on to our next game, Matt, sorry to do it to you, but next up on the list is none other than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers
I
versus
got to take my
your
medicine now, huh?
Minnesota Vikings. Well, I mean, last year the Vikings were what was like 11-0, was it, in one score games?
Yep.
And this year
0-1 in the
they've yeah,
postseason, 0-1 now. So
and this year they've already made that feat impossible to repeat, losing by a score of 20-17 in another one of those games that was just kind of just a meh game where it didn't seem like a whole lot was happening. Both teams were seemingly struggling. to kind of move the ball and establish a rhythm.
I mean, Minnesota's like first 3 or 4 drives, it was either a 3 and out or like a very costly turnover. Kirk turned the ball over 3 times in the first half, 2 fumbles, 1 interception towards the end of the first half. The first fumble was just on like a bad snap exchange. Their starting center, Garrett Bradbury, injured his back like 7 snaps into the game, and so he was out there. A guy named Austin Schlottman who was in there. He didn't do terrible, but it was still like it was a poor snap exchange that ruined a pretty solid Minnesota drive. I mean, there was also another one where Kirk got strip sacked on a DB blitz. They had a free rush. I mean, it felt like Tampa was sending the house a lot because they just wanted to get pressure on Kirk, and obviously, like Minnesota's offensive line, these pass blocking wise just isn't that great. I mean, Brian O'Neill's solid. Christian Darrisaw, who also missed a few snaps in that game because of an injury that he returned. But I mean, he's a good pass blocker. Like Minnesota's interior line is just terrible. Like Ed Ingram's not good. Garrett Bradbury's not good. They're just not good. And so it felt like they were sending the house a lot, and they were trying to put a lot of pressure on Kirk, and it felt like he was getting hit practically every other play. From the defensive side, I mean, Minnesota was dominant for the first quarter and a half. I mean, Baker, I mean, it was almost like it was like a mirror image of what was happening in Minnesota, where like Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator, was just setting the house. And he was putting a lot of pressure. Aesthetically, it was a whole lot better than what I saw last year from Ed Donatell's defense, where they would just rush 4 and hope that the remaining 7 defenders would hold up in pass coverage, and just that didn't work at all, obviously. At least it felt like at the start of this game, they were putting a lot of pressure on Baker, and obviously when Baker has had a lot of pressure on him in the past, he's been flustered and hasn't obviously performed. I mean, I think he was 3 for his first 12 with like 12 passing yards. I mean, they were 0-6 on their first 6 third downs. Like it was a great start for Minnesota's defense, which is not good. And then Baker, towards the end of that first half, was figuring stuff out a little bit. He was getting the ball out quicker. He was knowing where to go with the football. And I think Flores dialed back a little bit, and that's where Minnesota's problems, like really Minnesota's biggest problem in the second half, was getting off the field on third down. So I think Tampa finished like they were like 5 of 8 or 5 of 9 on third down in the second half after going like 1 of 8 in the first half. And that just combined with the turnovers, combined with Minnesota just couldn't run the ball. Like this was my biggest fear with Madison. I mean, obviously the interior of Tampa is pretty solid. Like Vita Vea is a good player. Levante David, Devin White, they're 2 like really good linebackers. So it was hard for Minnesota to run the ball a little bit. They don't have great push. They didn't have great push last year. They were one of the worst teams last year generating push off the line in run blocking situations. I mean, Jefferson looked awesome, but Kirk was
Addison looked good too.
Addison did look good, and he was just put in a lot of unfortunate situations. Kirk was, and it was like if you can't run the ball, obviously the turnovers didn't help. They ruined a couple good drives, couple almost touchdown drives, and when you can't get off the field on third down in the second half, and I mean, it felt like just Tampa was just more physical on the line of scrimmage on both sides as that game went on. And it's tough to lose at home to Baker Mayfield in week 1, but especially on Bud Grant Day, they were honoring the late and great Bud Grant, who passed away earlier this year. Rest in peace. But just an unfortunate day all around. Losing. I'm so numb to these goddamn 1-score games at this point. Doesn't really
don't even feel anything anymore either way.
But I'm not. There's so many of them. It's insane. I'm numb to it. I knew they were going to lose them at some point. I didn't expect it to be week 1 against Tampa, but I should have seen it coming. But But yeah, the vibes aren't great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't say I blame you. I'd be pretty upset if my team was in that spot as well. And I mean, you already kind of harped on it, but what I was going to say, the biggest takeaway for me in Minnesota was just how abysmal the run game was. I mean, I don't think Minnesota's going to win too many games where they're rushing for 41 yards. And I mean, I know that interior offensive line still isn't great, but in the Vikings football that I've watched, I mean, I don't watch like a ton of Vikings football, but like I had
Wise,
Dalvin
you're
Cook and
smart for that.
I had like Dalvin Cook in fantasy last year, so I usually watch them. But a lot of the success that I've seen like years past with the Vikings run game has usually been on those kind of outside concept runs. You know, the stretches, the tosses, the stuff where they're letting the guys like Dalvin Cook, or even when Madison would look good last year, you know, they look a lot better on the runs where they're kind of getting out in space a little bit more and can maybe make guys miss a little bit more rather than just, you know, sending them on inside zones or halfback dives into the arms of Vita Vea and Levante David every time.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not. I mean, also they had just a few unfortunate penalties that kind of bit them in the ass, but just like obviously when your starting center goes down, who I mean, Bradbury ain't great, but like Schlotman was okay, but like when you go up against Vita Vea every single possession, it's going to be really tough on you. And then they were doubling Vea a little bit. He and Cleveland were, and then he and Ingram were a little bit too. But it was just like the ill-timed mistakes were just the ones that really, like, you look back on it, obviously happened in the first half for the most part. And obviously that's not going to decide the game then because you still have 2 quarters to play, but it's just something that you wish you had back. But yeah, the vibes aren't great. The defense still isn't that good. I mean, obviously, again, it was more aesthetically pleasing watching them actually put pressure on the quarterback. But once someone finds that out, and even when Flores dialed it back a little bit, they weren't getting much of a rush on Baker. And so then that led to even more troubles because he was having time. He was getting the ball out. He was actually a lot more decisive as that game went on, which, I mean, good for him. He made the adjustment. They made the adjustment. But now they have to play in 2 days against your team, which I'm very much excited for, as you can tell by my reaction right now.
Kirk on primetime? You're excited?
Yeah, yay. They get to play another primetime game against Philly in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty banged up right now, but
that's not going to matter. It's not going to matter.
But I think we've covered this game enough. We'll let your suffering end, Mr.
I don't want to talk about it.
And we can now move on to the next game. The Saints and the Titans. This was another one of those kind of ugly games. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on here. We still got a few games to get through. This doesn't seem like one of the ones necessarily worth too much of our time. Derek Carr looked decent, 300 yards, didn't look perfect. I think the biggest takeaway was Ryan Tannehill was just god awful and had money on the Saints. I don't know why he even finished starting that game, but someone's got to be the quarterback for their next game because he just looked absolutely abysmal.
This was another game that I regretfully was kind of locked in on because I do have a lot of Olave stock in fantasy.
Same.
I just like him I like watching him in general. I think he's just a really good receiver. Both of these offensive lines were terrible. Like, it was, I mean, Tennessee's was worse than New Orleans, but it wasn't good for either side. Both offensive lines were poor. I thought Carr actually made some good plays down the stretch. Every time I think I looked up for a Tannehill pass attempt,
it was an interception.
It felt like an interception, or I'm trying to remember, maybe there was 1 or 2 to Hopkins that he completed, but he only completed 13 passes, so there wasn't very many completions to begin with. But yeah, this game stunk. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, not too much else to say about it. Kind of like I said, we got other games to get through, and this doesn't seem like necessarily one of them worth too much of our time. Saints won, but it was by no means a pretty one, and that brings us to another game that, in my opinion, I think we can go over pretty quickly, and that is the 49ers dominating the Steelers by a score of 30-7.
This game was
Another
over in 2 seconds.
Yeah, another game where I feel like I don't have too many takeaways. The Niners, in years past, have been one of those teams that have kind of been known to get off to slow starts, and so people thought that might be the case against the Steelers team. I know a lot of people are kind of hyping up the Steelers going into this year, and the Niners just said, "Screw everything and screw all of you," and just, I mean, flat out dominated. Like I said, it's not really, I feel like, too much to go over. And Christian McCaffrey was playing on like rookie mode in Madden. Brock Purdy, I mean, that just looked like one of the easiest games a QB could have. It was just every throw he made, it seemed like he had a lot of time. All of the receivers he would throw into seemed open. It was easy pickings for this entire Niners team all day. And then defensively, we know how good that defense is, and they pretty much played as advertised.
You cut out for a little bit.
Oh, did I? Did I cut out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know when exactly I cut out, but
You said defensively, and then I didn't hear another word that you
oh,
said.
I mean, no, I was just saying defensively. I mean, we all know what the Niners are capable of, and they kind of pretty much showed that. Kenny Pickett looked like he was scared to be out there.
Yeah.
Najee Harris was legit a non-factor, and I mean, yeah, Niners just dominated from for every second of this game.
Yeah, I mean, you look up, I probably took like 2 breaths, and it was 17-0.
Yeah,
It was just like snap of a finger. That was a terrible snap. That was better. But I mean, I do have a lot of Pittsburgh stock uh heading into the season. And like within like 5 minutes, it was like, oh shit, am I wrong? Or like, I mean, again, that's like a more of like a week one overreaction. Like, oh god, am I wrong? I mean, but Purdy looked phenomenal. I mean, he looked like picked up right where he left off. Uh, at least before his elbow fell off his body in the NFC Championship game. Um, and like Ayuk was tremendous. They built a good rapport with him last year, or Purdy did, excuse me. McCaffrey was amazing. I think it was like when you look at like the box score, like even like Joey Bosa, or I mean, excuse me, Nick Bosa wasn't even like all that effective, but he still was getting to the quarterback and at least generating pressure. And just that entire defense, I mean, they're so fast. They're so ridiculously fast and quick, and it felt like whenever Pickett was getting to like whenever he was throwing the ball and they were like there was always a niner or two there just within like the snap of a finger. I mean, they're so fast they're at getting to the football. They're an incredibly good tackling team. They just completely, as you kind of took everything that I was like, they just completely dominated this game. Like it was not that close at all. And I don't think that's completely indicative of like what we'll see from Pittsburgh this year, but Pittsburgh got their butts kicked. Plain and simple.
yeah, no, kind of like I said, I think we've pretty much harped on everything. There really isn't too much else to go over. Niners dominated from start to finish. Steelers looked helpless out there, and I think we can move on to our next game, which ended up being a surprisingly close game.
TJ Watt
And that,
looked good though. If I'm just gonna
yeah,
add, he looked
I mean,
really
TJ Watt's always going to look good. TJ Watt, he was the only guy on that team that seemed like showed up. But the next game we'll get into, like I said, was a surprisingly, I guess, close game. I guess you could say it was a surprisingly good game. But that is the Washington Commanders playing the Cardinals and beating them by a score of 20-16. I mean, I think going into this game, not too many people were going to be watching it. No, it's just not great teams. I mean, the Commanders aren't bad, but I mean, we all know the Cardinals are pretty much going into this year tanking, but I think to their credit, they actually didn't look horrible. They actually, put up a fight and were pretty much in this game all the way up until the very end, which I think surprised a lot of people, myself included.
From a watchability standpoint, it felt like Dobbs was like kind of good. I mean, obviously, I don't know if the stats reflect that much, but like he wasn't, at least in terms of like what I
He
expected
wasn't bad, which
versus what I
for
expected
him was
from
good.
him. He looked kind of good. I don't think that's, yeah, he didn't look bad.
Which means he looked good. I mean, yeah, 21 for 30, 132 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. He was just kind of there and didn't
Yeah.
make any big mistakes, which is pretty much all the Cardinals are going to be asking him to do all year.
Yeah. Like Howell was okay. I mean, it was a little bit of a roller coaster for him. I liked what I saw from Brian Robinson, even though they were featuring him a lot more in the second half than they were the first. I feel like he wasn't hardly getting any touches in the first half at all. But no, I was this was like an oddly close game. The Commanders shook the Dan Snyder demons that previously existed, and that's now ridded from them in their existence. So congratulations for them, because the Dan Snyder Commanders, you see, would have lost this game in some terribly bad fashion that no one would have expected.
That's why I miss Daniel Snyder. I want him back in Washington.
What'd you say?
I said that's why I miss Daniel Snyder. Bring him back to Washington.
I don't think they're going to be a big threat to you guys, anyways. But
yeah, my dad always.
Arizona's defense, they were pretty solid. I mean, they made a couple important plays throughout that game, but for the most part, I was just impressed with Washington's. What's the word I'm looking for? Them being able to respond to adversity late, because they were down in that game until a couple scores towards the end put them ahead. But they were able to shake the Dan Snyder demons.
Yeah, and I think Washington's gonna win most of their games that they do win will be on the back of their defense. I mean, we know that this defense is no joke. I mean, they got that defensive line. Chase Young, when he's healthy, is just a different beast. Darren Payne.
Sweat was really good.
Jonathan Allen, Sweat. This defense we know can get stuff done. The secondary, not quite as good as the line, but when you have a defensive line as dominant as that, it kind of takes some pressure off the secondary. And I think this win was no exception. I mean, their offense, Sam Howell wasn't great. I don't think they won because of Sam Howell or the offense. The defense kind of did what it needed to do. I mean, obviously going against Joshua Dobbs and the Cardinals isn't really, I think, a great indicator of your defense. But I mean, all they can do is, play who they have in front of them, and their defense did at least get the job done. Week 1. But aside from that, don't think there's too much else in this Cardinals-Washington game. Washington won to the surprise of not too many people, but Cardinals, to their credit, were at least able to keep it close. So, I guess they get respect points for that. But moving on to our next game, we'll cover the last quarterback from this rookie class, and C.J. Stroud and the Texans, who got handled pretty easily by the Ravens, 25-9. This was kind of a weird game to me because it was almost kind of similar to like the Browns-Bengals games, or the Browns-Bengal game we were talking about, where it was like the Ravens, won pretty handedly, but like it still didn't seem like they were, kind of fully in rhythm and like they were fully firing on all cylinders. It seemed kind of more like another one of those games where the Texans just are going to be the Texans and not be very good.
I mean, when I was watching this game, I didn't have this game on a whole lot, but I had it, I think, a lot during the second half. And the thing that I took away from it was I was like, impressed is the wrong word, but I didn't hate what I saw from Stroud. It felt like he was better as that game wore on, and it felt like he got more comfortable. Um, and like obviously, I was impressed with what I saw from Nico Collins. I was impressed with what I saw from Robert Woods. It was a little bit of a disappointing game from Dalton Schultz, only 2 catches on 5 targets for 4 yards. I expected him to have more of an impact. The Texans did have like 3 or 4 fourth down attempts, or not conversion. Like they went like 1 of 4 on fourth down in that game. And so like there were a couple drives where they were putting a drive together, but obviously when you're down by that many points, you're going to go for it. And it felt like they just weren't able to get out of their own way in that respect. The defense showed flashes. I think it's going to be a bit of adjustment for Baltimore with Todd Monken's new system. It's more pass heavy. And so that's going to be a little bit of an adjustment. Zay Flowers was awesome.
He looked great.
He was cooking literally every Houston defensive back. And I really didn't I have a lot of Zay Flowers stock. And I just felt vindicated by that performance from him because, I mean, he had 9 catches for 78 yards. It felt like he had more than that. Like, honestly, it felt like he could have had like 14, 15. Like, he was cooking them on every single play. And so I think he's going to turn into one of Lamar's favorite targets really, really quickly. I mean, it's also unfortunate, like, Marcus Williams got hurt, Ronnie Stanley got hurt, Dobbins is out for the year now.
Ravens just can never catch a break with injuries, I swear.
Right, but like it's just unfortunate that like I obviously have Dobbins is someone who I loved coming out of Ohio State, and he just hasn't been able to stay healthy for the most part in his NFL career. I mean, Edwards and Justice Hill were fine, but they're not complete difference makers like Dobbins is when he's healthy. Like when he's fully healthy, I think he's one of like the better backs in the league. Or at least he has the potential to be. I mean, they're playing behind a pretty solid offensive line. Obviously, without Stanley, that's it downgrades a little bit. But it's just unfortunate from that aspect. I mean, but I was very happy with what I saw from Zay Flowers. Again, I still think this is going to be a little bit of an adjustment for Lamar. There's going to be some growing pains here and there, but I think he'll eventually figure it out as the year goes on. I did like what I saw from Stroud. I do think that I don't think that offense is going to be as bad as some people think it'll be. And so yeah, that's my takeaway. I mean, also like the Ravens are also I think there were additional injuries on their back end. And so that may have helped Stroud a little bit. But again, Nico Collins, Robert Woods, Tank Dell. I think Dalton Schultz will be better.
Yeah.
I think
him and Stroud, I think, will develop a connection over time. I mean, rookie QBs usually end up loving tight ends, just kind of as a safety valve. But I think one of the bigger takeaways for me was just the Texans having them throw the ball 44 times. That to me just does not seem like it's going to be a recipe for success. And like I say that, but then also when watching the game, I mean, it was every time they handed it to Dameon Pierce, it was just 1 yard, no yards, loss of 1, 2 yards. And so they're just, it's like at a certain point, it's all like, okay, well, I guess we might as well just pass it instead of guaranteedly being in 2nd and 8 at the best case scenario. I mean, this is the offensive line for the Texans. Bad. You know, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
they can't fall behind in games. And I think that's something that could be an issue early in the season. I wonder I still am curious, like, how this defense either improves or just kind of stays the same with D'Amico. Because it did felt like there were points in games where it's like, again, like they get the ball back, they can't convert on 4th down, but then they get another stop right back. Houston does. And so that might be a byproduct of them going against a completely new offense without Mark Andrews. Or they decide this might not be like a bottom 2 or bottom 3 defense or whatever it was in the league. Like Will Anderson definitely had his moments and he looked solid. I'm not completely out, but like I don't think this is going to be like one of the worst defenses in the league, but depending on how much they're on the field, they just might be. by virtue of time of possession. Like, I don't know, but
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, the Texans team isn't going to be very good. I think they're just kind of hoping to see maybe some flashes from Stroud, and I think at the very least he showed that on Sunday that some of those flashes of what he can be, and the connections he can kind of form with these receivers. But I don't think it's going to be another long season for the Texans. And I think they'll find themselves picking pretty high
probably.
in this draft once again. But I mean, it's a long rebuild, so.
But don't they? Wait, don't I thought don't the Cardinals have their pick?
Oh, you know what? You're right. Yeah, because they traded up for Will
Yeah,
Anderson.
I think that's what it
No, yeah, I
was.
think you're right. Now, now that now that I, now that you say that, I think you're right. But moving on to our first game in the 1 o'clock window, finally done with the 10 o'clock window, or the 10 a.m. Eastern time, I should say, or
1
Pacific
a.m.
time,
1
I
p.m.
should
Eastern.
say. Yeah, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 Eastern time. But was the Packers playing the Bears? A lot of people thought that with Aaron Rodgers no longer in Green Bay, this could maybe be the chance for the Bears to turn a new leaf in the Bears Packers rivalry. And
Nope.
I think we very quickly found out that that is not going to be the case, and that Jordan Love, at least in terms of kicking the Bears' ass as a Packer, he at least showed that he can seemingly do that.
Yeah, no, I, in our overreactions post, please go check that out again at vendettasportsmedia.com. Um, I had the Packers as a playoff team coming into this season. I kind of had them in that 6-7 spot in the NFC. I just like that. I mean, I think their offensive line's really good when they're healthy. Obviously, a lot of that is with Bakhtiari. If he can stay healthy, I think they have a really good unit. Um, I like their defense. I like Jair Alexander. I like Quay Walker. I like just some of the pieces that they have on that end. And like, I know their skill position players are young. Uh, I think Christian Watson, like he had an insane touchdown rate last year, like one of like historically good. Obviously, that's going to regress, but he still has the speed, he has the size, he has the athleticism to make up for that. To make up for a guy, I guess his youth. Like I think he probably still has a limited route tree as like as a receiver, but I think he has like good hands. Again, I think he's very athletic.
Yeah, him being back will make this offense even better next week.
Yeah,
They don't need him. They got Romeo Dubs, baby. He went
yeah.
off.
They got Romeo, and it's like
Well,
obviously
come
I
on.
hate that Romeo's a Packer. I wish he was on practically every other team ever, so I could at least not be disgusted that he's a Green Bay Packer. But like he was good on Sunday. He didn't have a whole lot of targets coming his way, but again, like he had those two touchdowns. He had one, I think, where it was like a back shoulder fade, or like they threw it up to him and he caught it. And obviously, I covered him when he was here at Nevada, and he was one of the more like passive, quiet, independent guys. Like when obviously being around media and being around your teammates is two totally different things. But that was just kind of like the book on him and how he incredibly quiet he was. But after that play, he was talking so much shit, and I loved it. Even though I hate the Packers, I loved it. I don't want to say hate. I just strongly dislike the Packers, but I loved watching him at
I
least like
understand.
talk that shit. Um, but like this Green Bay completely boat raced this team in the second half. It really wasn't close at all. I mean,
No.
they started getting home on Justin Fields a little bit, putting pressure on him in the pocket. They weren't really doing that the first part of the game. Um, I still just don't love the skill positions for Chicago all that much, if I'm being honest with you. Their defense is a tire fire. Um, they got to get better on the offensive and defensive lines. They just have to. They didn't really improve that in the offseason, but they just have to in general. Uh, Jordan Love, he did miss a few throws here and there, but I think he did a good job making the throws that he had to make. 15 to 27, 245 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a big conversion to Aaron Jones on 4th and 3 late in the game. He did make a couple of those good throws to Dubs in the red zone. I thought Musgrave looked good. I mean, I know they were raving about him in camp, and he obviously looked good in his first game. Jaden Reed looked good. Again, this is a very inexperienced receiving core, but I thought Love did well with that. And on the other side, it was just like once it fell apart for Chicago, it completely fell apart. And 30-20, I don't think it's the greatest, or 38-20, I don't think it's the greatest reflection because that one touchdown that Chicago scored was like super late in the game. It was
garbage time.
38. It was 38-14. They just got completely crushed. And I don't know how much of that is Fields versus not Fields, but it just wasn't good all around for Chicago at all. And Green Bay really just might be one of the best teams, and then they might win the NFC North. They might not. I don't know. It's hard to say after week 1, but they looked really good.
Yeah, no, I think you kind of more or less hit the nail on the head there again. It's just, I think a lot of people were overhyping some of the additions the Bears made. This is still just going to be a very bad football team, it seems like. I mean, that trade for Chase Claypool just looks worse and worse each week for that, basically what's now a first-round pick. And he just does absolutely nothing. And I mean, DJ Moore is a good receiver, but he's not going to, move a needle really in any way. This offensive line still very bad. This defense is still bad. There's still just a lot of work to do in Chicago, and I think the Packers kind of exposed that. But moving on to our next game, I suppose we can cover my team, which would be the Philadelphia Eagles defeating the New England Patriots in a game that got way, way, way too close for comfort for me. I mean, the Eagles in the first quarter looked like they picked up right where they left off last year. Just looked like they were firing on all cylinders. I mean, it was like you blinked your eye and we were up 16-0.
Yeah.
Pick six and then the Zeke fumble that gave us the ball basically in the red zone. And all of a sudden it's 16-0. It seemed like we were just going to kind of start pulling away. Mac Jones hadn't looked good, and the Patriots just kind of did a good job at keeping it relatively close going into halftime. And I mean, a big part of why they were able to do that was, the second quarter, the Eagles just forgot how to play football. I mean, I saw it was 19 yards in the second quarter, so we didn't get 2 first downs in the entire second quarter. Eagles kind of gave up on running the ball, I think, a little bit too early. They tend to do that and try to rely too much on the passing game, and it just kind of causes the offense to get stagnant. That's kind of what we saw happen. The Patriots were able to get it to within 2 at halftime. And then really in the third and fourth quarter, the defenses for both teams just kind of took over. And the Eagles scored 9 points in the entirety of the second half, and the Patriots scored 6. So it really turned into a real grind fest in that second half. The defenses were just kind of churning away, and thankfully the Eagles defense and the defensive line, kind of stepped up and made the plays when it did. But to the Patriots' credit, they made the adjustments they needed to at halftime or even after just the first quarter. Because their offense looked so different just after that first quarter. It looked like a completely different team.
I mean, you could speak to this more than I could, but it felt like there were plenty of times last regular season where Philly would get up in games and there would be more complacency.
Yeah, well, there was that. It was this stat where I think it was in the second quarter. I think we were the best team in the league.
Yeah,
and then I think it was the fourth quarter we were technically the worst team in the league because we would just go up by a couple scores and just run the ball. But I think it was last year. I think it was
second quarter.
Second
Y'all
quarter,
really remember that? Yeah.
we were the greatest team in the NFL, which was funny to see. We were absolutely horrendous in the second quarter on Sunday, but yeah, it just seemed like we kind of gave up on the run game a little bit too much. a little too early, which I'm never a big fan of. Hurts definitely didn't look great. He missed some reads that I thought he should have hit. But I mean, he also didn't look horrible. I just kind of think he was another one of those quarterbacks that was a little sluggish to get started with the year.
What happened with Swift?
What happened with Swift? I mean,
Why wasn't
honestly,
he
I
on the
can't.
field? I'm relying on you to answer this question. I'm just kidding.
Well, I unfortunately don't have insider information with Nick Sirianni. I wish I did, but I mean, I
You just
honestly
turning
can't.
Nick Sirianni. No.
Yep, I'll go call him real quick and go give me a few minutes. I'll be back with the inside scoop. I mean, honestly, I don't know what it is. I figured that at least in week one or in the first couple weeks, that Gainwell would maybe be getting more of the snaps, or at least a slight majority of the snaps. But I didn't think that Swift just wasn't going to see the field at all because it seems like he's had enough time to kind of get acclimated to the offense at this point. Like we didn't just trade for him, so I don't think it's that. I just don't know. If the Eagles are still wanting to work him into the offense, because I mean, Gainwell, to his credit, looked really good last year in the committee he was a part of, and I mean, he looked good on Sunday as well. It wasn't like he was bad, and I think that maybe played a part in why they kept him out there. He just continued to look good, but I don't want to tell Swift fantasy managers to panic too much yet. But I also feel like I don't want to just say that everything's going to be perfectly fine. I think within the next few weeks, at the absolute worst, the snap count should start to even out. Because I mean, it seems like at the worst, I mean, I think Penny was a healthy scratch that game, so it seems like at the very least, Gainwell and Swift are going to be the kind of two main backs. But I'll be honest, I did not see DeAndre Swift just not playing at all. Like I didn't see that coming.
I did see a theory floated on the socials, on the interwebs, the deep and dark interwebs, that they use Gainwell a lot in this game because they're going to try to save Swift for. They're going to use him a lot more on Thursday, and considering there's such a quick turnaround,
Yeah,
one maybe.
that could definitely be
Again, it's
a
a
thought
theory. I have
process.
no idea if it's true or not. I've just heard it, and I was like, oh, that could be an interesting, I guess, strategy. But you're right. I think I didn't expect that at all from him. I mean, again, I have him in 2 of my 3 fantasy leagues. And I mean, I didn't start him, so thank God. But I just look and it's just like, wait, he had 1 carry for 3 yards. Like, what's going on here? But that's just besides the point. But
Yeah, it was definitely a surprising thing to see, but thankfully the Eagles, for my sake, were able to pull the win off. Definitely was an ugly one. Was not uh, a pretty win by any means necessary, but in the NFL, it's all that matters is you get that win. Any given Sunday, anything can happen. So as long as you get that win, that is really all that matters at the end of the day. Got a little
Mac
lucky,
Jones
but
also getting 54 pass attempts.
yeah, that was crazy. I mean, the Patriots just kind of it also just kind of gave up on the run game as well. But to Mac Jones' credit, he looked really good
The fact that he
in the
was
second
getting 54
half.
pass attempts was just nuts. I
Yeah, that's
mean, I
probably not
don't
going to be a
go on.
recipe for success for the Patriots too much. Mac Jones don't the ball that much.
Not at all, but I mean, he did look okay. He actually didn't look terrible. I mean, there are a few throws that he sailed and that weren't accurate, but I think he was still picking apart. Not picking apart's the wrong word, but at least finding receivers within kind of Philly's scheme a little bit in the second half. And obviously there was a couple 4th downs where Philly went or New England went for it once they got it, but then they went for it again. Down by I don't want to say
I
maybe it
was so
was
dumb we went for it at the end. It was so
yeah.
stupid.
And they missed it, but no, I just don't I didn't expect again. I didn't watch just this game, but I didn't expect to look at it after and see Mac Jones having nearly 60 pass attempts, and it's just again didn't look like god awful. I mean, he looked actually all things considered, against that Philly defense, albeit even though they're not as strong in the middle, they still look good, or at least Max still look good. And then like Kendrick Bourne looked really, really good. Like, have yourself a day. Ramondre looked pretty solid late. Hunter Henry looked good. Like, they don't have an embarrassment of riches in the skill positions outside of like Ramondre. Again, Kendrick Bourne's probably going to be like one of the bigger fantasy pickups this week, just to buy the way in the waiver wire for all of you who pay attention to that stuff. But yeah, it's not something I expect, but that's a side note.
Yep. Kind of like I said, wasn't really a pretty win, but got the job done. Always nice to be able to beat Bill Belichick on the road. Never an easy thing to do. But moving on to our next 1 o'clock window game was another pretty mad game. Raiders, Broncos. I think the outcome ended up surprising a lot of people in that the Raiders actually won by a score of 17-16. Kind of like I said, a pretty boring, unexciting game for anybody who isn't a fan of either one of these two teams. Jacoby Myers, have yourself a day. He was on the bench in one of my fantasy leagues.
Yeah, he had a very good day.
Cool 30
him and
points on
Devontae
my
both.
bench. Yeah, I mean, Garoppolo, definitely didn't look horrible. I mean, 20 for 26, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 pick. 83.5 QBR. Seems like a pretty typical good Garoppolo game. Just manage the game, make the throws you need to. Don't try and do too much, and just hope the rest of your team can do what it takes to win. And the Broncos I just don't know what to make with this Broncos team. They're so weird.
They fell apart.
I don't want to think they're going to be bad again, but it's like, after watching this, it's like, well, geez, man, not leaving me too much to hold on to in terms of hope.
They fell apart in the second half, and because they were clicking on practically every cylinder, at least offensively, in the first half. Like, I think Wilson went like 17 of 19. I don't remember how many yards he had, but he was really good. And they had probably 9 or 10 first downs, something like that. I don't remember exactly how much, but they were, at least Wilson was spreading the ball around. They were getting chunks of yardage. Like, they were looking connected. And then in the second half, the wheels completely fell off the wagon. And the Raiders, defensively, to their credit, they were getting stops. And it felt, for Jimmy G, it was like not the perfect Jimmy G. Like, it was like what you would expect from Jimmy G.
Yeah, it was a typical Garoppolo game.
Yeah, not great, not terrible, just like what
enough to win.
Yeah, enough to win.
Just enough to win.
I was surprised with how Jacoby played, because I thought he was just really good throughout. And Devontae, it felt like every catch for him, not catch for him, it was Surtain who was playing him well. But it felt like most every catch that Devontae had was when it was against another defensive back. And so I don't know if that was just a schematic thing for Denver or not, but Javonte Williams, his first game back after tearing his ACL last year, he looked all right. But again, the offense just sputtered late for Denver, at least late, in the second half. And obviously being able to only scratch together 3 points in the second half against Denver or against a Raiders defense that isn't good at all. At home, that's an issue.
Yeah, the concerning thing for me for the Broncos here, and specifically Russell Wilson, is the fact that he's completing 27 passes for 177 yards against a bad Raiders defense. This is really not a Raiders defense that should be instilling fear in anyone, with the exception of Max Crosby, or especially in that secondary. Receivers should just be kind of having their way, and it just seemed like for the life of them the Broncos just could not kind of take the top off and get the ball down the field. They're just always, it seems like, kind of grinding out these drives, which can be a good thing, but leaves you open to just potential for turnovers and mistakes and whatnot. And at least on Sunday, I think the Broncos just made too many mistakes. Had some penalties that bit them in the butt. And I mean, yeah, they just really did not look good, and kind of fearful because if they really can't, they're not able to, kind of ex- like extend the ball down the field, take those shots and have that deep threat, then I think it's going to be another pretty rough season for the Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, overall, I think that's pretty much it for that game. I don't really think I got too much else to say on it. Definitely surprised that the Raiders won, but the Broncos just seemingly are not going to be a good football team, and I guess
Maybe.
that's okay.
It's also one of those weird things where it's like I think this is how it is with Denver. They play the Raiders week 1, but then they don't play them again until week 18 or something like that.
Yeah, that just makes
Happened a
no
few times this
sense.
week with a couple different teams, but it's just a funny dynamic.
Definitely, but moving on, we go from a pretty mad game to, I think, pretty easily the game of the week, and could be contention for game of the year only in week 1, and that
Cowboys
was,
Giants, no.
yep, beat me to it. Now the Miami Dolphins beating the Los Angeles Chargers 36-34. I mean, this game was
awesome.
absolute barn burner. I mean, Red Zone basically just at one point just had the entire game. They just said to hell with every other game. You guys are just watching this one, and it was pretty easy to see why. It was defense left the building for both teams. They said, "Man, we don't really care." It was just going to come down to basically whoever had the ball last with enough time to do damage with it. And I mean, I know the Tua haters are probably in shambles now. I mean, 466 yards, 3 touchdowns, 110 rating. It was just, I mean, Tua was dominant. Tyreek Hill made J.C. Jackson his son. Just was absolutely religiously cooking him on every single play. The Chargers just didn't seemingly make any adjustments to it. They just kept saying, all right, we'll just guard Tyreek Hill one-on-one with no safety help. And it was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Like, it's clearly not working. He has 168 yards at halftime. Maybe make an adjustment. Chargers seemingly never did. To their credit, they for the most part stayed in the game. Herbert looked great. Eckler was doing Eckler things, but this wasn't enough in the end.
No, for Tyreek, it felt like every time he caught the ball, he was wide open.
Yeah.
20 to 25 yards down the field in the middle of the field. And like Tua was just picking apart their cover 2, cover 1, whatever they were playing in coverage. He was picking it apart, whether it was a play action, standard drop back, 3-step drop, whatever the case was. Like, he was open so much, and that's just a testament to like how good he is. But he was also just finding the holes in the defense, and Tua was finding him because of that. I mean, Waddle was still like pretty solid. He was also he had a couple creases in the middle of the defense that he found. But Tua was just flat out incredible. Like that throw at the end where he's scrambling in the pocket. He moves up, finds Tyreek down the sideline in between the defensive back and the safety on that last drive. But then he somehow fits that ball to Tyreek in the end zone.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I mean,
I still don't know how that throw got completed.
If the defensive back turns his head, like, that's probably a pick, or at least a pass deflection at like least. But the fact that he was still able to fit that in there, like, was just crazy to me.
That was an insane throw.
Eckler was really, really good. I mean, he had that one like 55, 58 8, however long it was, yard run in the second half. I mean, Herbert was pretty solid. Uh, Keenan Allen was all right. Mike Williams was all right. Like they were all right. I mean, obviously, I thought Eckler was like their most important or like their best player. It was an introduction to the Kellen Moore offense, which I think had a few kind of cool gimmicks. Just kind of a couple trick plays and unordinary stuff that we saw. And that's just kind of how it was in Dallas as well. I mean, they like on short down and distance situations, they would pull out something funky to get the first down or something you wouldn't necessarily expect, which is the intention. But this, I don't know what to make of like the chart because it feels like the Chargers defense has so much talent with like, I mean, Kendricks is there. J.C. Jackson, I remember he was like a solid player. He might not be as good of a corner anymore. But like it feels like they have pieces like Joey Bosa. Like it feels like they have pieces. But then when you allow 36 points, 1,000 yards of offense, I don't remember exactly what Miami finished with, but a lot. I think it's probably somewhere in like the 550 range. I'm guessing because Tua had 66. Like that's a problem at home. Like it was just another like Chargers being Chargers type game. Like it would. Like they choke away a lead late.
They always find a way to lose.
Yeah, like it just feels like they have a lot of talent. Like Derwin James, Kenneth Murray's a good player. Khalil Mack, like obviously he's more aging than the other guys that I just mentioned, but it feels like again they just have talent, and it didn't feel like we saw it obviously coming to fruition because Tua was picking it apart. Maybe that's just a testament to the Dolphins' offense. I mean, when Tua's on the field and not concussed, he's really, really good.
Yeah, we saw that last year.
Yeah,
they started off like 7-1.
Yeah. So again, I don't know how much to make of that. If that's just the Chargers defense being that bad, the Brandon Staley defense that we all thought he would come in and implement that hasn't really come into fruition yet, or if that's just a testament to the Dolphins offense, which they did do a lot of kind of weird gimmicky stuff. Like they would shift a lot. They shifted Tyreek. Like he would be in the slot and they would shift him out to the outside just to determine if it's man coverage or not. And they feel like it did that a lot with he and Waddle. Instead of motioning them across the line of scrimmage, they would motion just like kind of side to side on that same side in going out. And I thought that was just an interesting gimmick. They did that a little bit with Mostert too, but I don't know if that's just a testament to their offense or if that's just a testament to the Chargers defense or maybe both. I don't know.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I mean, Dolphins offense is definitely going to be very high scoring this year. And, I don't think exactly the Chargers defense will be quite that bad, but I also don't think it's going to be very great. But I mean, overall, it was a great game. I think everyone who watched it was thoroughly entertained. I mean, I know I was. A lot of fantasy points for people who had players in either one of these games. But moving on to our next game, we kind of come back down to earth a little bit in terms of the grandness of the games. The last game of the 1 o'clock window on Sunday was the Rams Seahawks. I think this was another one of the surprising scores. A lot of people thought the Seahawks were going to win. The Rams are kind of in a rebuild right now, technically, not really. It's kind of weird, but they were dealing with some injuries too. Didn't seem like it was going to be their game, and to their credit, I mean they came out and pretty much dominated this game.
Mm-hmm.
It was like kind of close at the start. I mean, Seattle was winning at one point, but then in the second half, I mean, the Rams just absolutely took over. I mean, guys like Tutu Atwell looked great. Puka Nakua was a popular name in fantasy right now. He basically looked like Cooper Kupp out there. The run game, wasn't bad for him. I mean, Akers, 22 carries for 29 yards is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. But, Kyron Williams on the flip end, 15 for 52 and 2 touchdowns definitely wasn't bad. But, I mean, the Rams defense, I think, was kind of the main thing here. I mean, Geno Smith looked uncomfortable all game. 16 completions for 112 yards.
They
Seattle
were also
hardly.
missing their two starting
Yeah.
tackles.
Then I think you definitely were able to tell over the course of the game, the run game, guys like Kenneth Walker weren't really able to fully get going. And it just kind of really overall, I think the Seahawks not having their two tackles just kind of threw off the entire rhythm of their offense.
Yeah. And like they were able, felt like at least in the fourth quarter, maybe a little bit in the third, LA was getting home a lot on their pass rushes. And they were, it's not like they were like calling like a bunch of blitzes. It just felt like Aaron Donald doing Aaron Donald shit and creating havoc. I mean, Byron Young was getting in there. Kobe Turner was getting in there. Like they had guys getting in there that wasn't just Aaron Donald, but he's obviously the one that is the head of the snake. And he's just so good. Like I still think he's probably the best defensive player in the league, or at least one of them. Like he's just that
Yeah,
special.
you could definitely make that argument.
Yeah. Even though his name's kind of flown under a little bit under the radar. Like I know Chris Jones was great as the number one defensive tackle last year by PFF. TJ Watt, obviously when he's healthy. Nick Bosa when he's like all these guys are incredibly phenomenal players, but just the impact that Aaron Donald could have playing defensive tackle, I think is second to none at times. And I think we saw that down the stretch in Sunday's game. But you're right, Geno looked flustered outside of their first couple of drives. I mean, it almost looked like the Geno of pre-2022.
Yeah, the backup of 10 years.
Yeah. Like Kenneth Walker was fine. Again, DK when he was getting the ball was okay. But just on the Rams side of things, I mean, it looked like, speaking of pre-2022, it looked like Stafford was pre-2022.
Yeah.
Without Cooper Kupp, I mean, to some extent, he does sometimes have tunnel vision with Cooper Kupp. But in a game where there's no Cooper Kupp, you have to spread the ball around.
Yep, he looked good.
And with Tutu, with Puka Nacua, with Tyler Higbee, Van Jeffers, like they all looked really, really good. Obviously, the former two looking the best. I mean, they combined 16 receptions for 238 yards.
Yeah, no, they definitely dominated. I think a lot of people were probably surprised by this outcome, but
yeah,
to the Rams' credit, they came to play. They, made the second half adjustments, and the Seahawks just frankly were unable to adjust. But with that will end our coverage of the Sunday game, or I guess the Sunday day games. We got one more game on Sunday, but I'll just tell you right now, I don't think there's really too much to cover on it because anybody who watched Sunday Night Football witnessed one of the worst massacres in recent football history.
Oh my God.
Cowboys won by a score of 40-0, and I mean, I didn't get to watch the game. I was at work, but thankfully,
Dog, it was an
I didn't really
absolute
get.
ass
Thankfully,
kicking.
I didn't get to watch the game.
It
Didn't
was
seem
a
like I missed
shit kicking.
much.
No, the Giants were able to drive a little bit on their first drive, but it fell apart. I mean, there was a botched snap on, I think it was second down or third down when they were. I don't know if they were in the red zone, but they were getting near the red zone, and there was a botched snap from John Michael Schmitz, who is a rookie out of Minnesota, or was it Minnesota? I think it was Minnesota. But he snapped it low. Jones had to go back. He corralled it obviously, but then it was third and long. I think they didn't get the first down. Blocked field goal for a touchdown, and then I don't know if it was the next drive or the ensuing drive after that, but pick six, and like before you know it, it's 14-0, and really just it felt like the wheels were so far off the wagon at that point. It felt like the Giants couldn't generate anything outside of that. Like their first drive looked like decent. But then, like as the game goes on, the more the league grows, they're starting to have to throw the ball more. The conditions were not good in New York. I mean, it was rainy. It was just kind of gross weather. But like it, every single drop back, Daniel Jones was getting smacked by 2 or 3 different Cowboys. Like it was, they completely dominated the line of scrimmage. They
They
meaning
just
Michael
dominated
defense.
everything.
And
Really.
like I was so like honestly, they had 7 sacks, I think, at the end of the game. Dude, it legit felt like they had doubled that. Like it was insane how many times Daniel Jones was getting hit. Not even just when he was in the pocket, when he was scrambling, because he was having to scramble a bunch of times. Even on that first drive, he had to scramble because no one was open downfield and they were getting home on him. Like the Giants' offensive line, it was a disaster. A disaster. And the worst part is Dayball kept him in when it was
I
40.
know. He was just trying to
What
get him
exactly
killed.
are you trying to get him killed?
What it seemed like.
Oh man, I
mean,
thankfully Daniel Jones didn't get hurt. But he got beat the hell up.
Yeah, I mean, I knew
it was bad. It was really,
I mean,
really bad.
yeah, I knew it was bad when I checked the score at one point, and it was like 30 something to nothing, and Dak Prescott had like 80 passing yards. I was all like, it's like, oh my god, what is happening? I'm like, Dak doesn't even have 100 yards, and they're up 30 points, and then I saw everything, a kick return.
Yeah, Micah Parsons
special teams
best defensive
touchdown
player on the field out of anyone on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. He's always everywhere. I mean, I don't think really there's too much else to go over with this game. Cowboys just really dominated in every phase of the game. The Giants just didn't even look like they knew they were playing a game today. They looked like they just woke up out of a coma and were told they got to play football.
They looked like they weren't even there.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very bad. Definitely not what the networks wanted for the first Sunday night football game.
No.
But with that, we move over to our last game, which was last night, and it was first Monday night football game of the year. And I think the term bittersweet would be the perfect way to describe this if you're a Jets fan. Yeah, you got the win, but at what cost? As Thanos, I believe, would say, the Jets do end up getting the win in overtime, but it has now been reported that it is at the expense of Aaron Rodgers' Achilles heel, and he will not play for the rest of this season and very well likely could retire. I wouldn't not be surprised if he just decides to not go through the rehab. He's 38 now.
39, almost 40.
Yeah, 39. I'm coming on 40, so I don't know how likely it is he'll want to go through the whole rehab process. But aside from just the injury, in terms of the game itself, I mean, everyone's been talking about how bad Josh Allen looked. I mean, I think Josh Allen's usually due for these games every now and then. Sometimes he just has that hero complex. He tries to do too much, tries to get too much in one play, and just forces way too many bad throws sometimes. And I think in simple terms, last night he just kind of got punished for it. Tried to do too much, too many different times, and he just looked a little, almost kind of like a deer in headlights at some points. Like the moment seemed too big for him, which is weird considering we've seen him perform well in much bigger stages. So I don't know if it was another one of those cases where he just was kind of shaking off the cobwebs. The entire Bills offense was shaking off the cobwebs. But I mean, especially after Aaron Rodgers got hurt, like who in their right mind after Aaron Rodgers got hurt was going to say, "Oh yeah, don't worry, Zach Wilson's going to lead the Jets to a win"?
Yeah.
Everyone would have thought you were crazy.
All you have to do if you're Buffalo is play mistake-free, disciplined football.
And they did the opposite of that.
Like quite literally. the
They
exact
just tried to
opposite of
make as
that.
many mistakes as they could.
Like, it's crazy. Like, I enjoy watching Josh Allen play. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I think he's like a top 4, top 5 quarterback. I don't think there's much question about that. But like, there were times last night where I'm like watching, I'm like, with even not even like with some of like the throwing decisions of it. It was some of like the dude was legit Superman diving when he's 5 yards away from the first down on like second and
Yeah,
long.
it's just not every play is,
Like,
it's what Carson Wentz used to always do. It's just you don't need to play hero ball every single play. Live to see another down.
why would you put yourself in a situation like that where you're just like, dude, I'm gonna get this first down? You're jumping, you're 7 yards away. Like, what are you doing? I don't understand it. But even then, like, I don't know if I would have to go back and look at the film of it, but I don't know if the third interception was entirely his fault. It might have been a little bit behind. I think it was Diggs who he threw to. But like a couple of the others where he was just throwing into like 2 guys or guys who
Yeah,
definitely covered. Those are just unforced errors that you just cannot make. It sounds like something I would do in Madden. I'm an
yeah,
idiot sometimes.
yeah. You just like you're mad, you're frustrated, you get sacks, you want to hurry up and just say F
Yeah.
it, throw in a streak. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think you said it best last night. The Griffin, Crest, Josh Allen agenda was looking really good last night.
Although again, I still do think that more people, as the day goes on, even like last year, I thought they drift more to him, what he thinks, what he meaning Griffin. I think what people are drifting more to what he thinks than the opposite. But again, that's a different conversation for a different day. But his agenda was still thriving as hell, like thriving its ass off last.
Yeah, definitely for this week. Cannot take away from that. But aside from the Josh Allen, Bills aspects, I mean, got to give credit to the Jets. I mean, not too many teams could have gone through an injury like that of that magnitude and beat a perennial Super Bowl contender. I don't think anybody would be surprised if the Bills are in the Super Bowl or at least, in the AFC Championship game.
Right.
And so to lose, your starting quarterback and then be forced to go out with Zach Wilson and get a win, I mean, is, in my opinion, very impressive. And I mean, Brees Hall had a great game. I mean, 10 carries for 127 yards. He had that big 83-yard touchdown. Couldn't quite hook the trailer a little bit towards the end of that run. Ran out of gas, it looked like. Couldn't get the touchdown. But
as soon as he hit like the 50-yard line, he was running out of steam. And it was just like,
yeah, I mean,
I get it. He's not
recovering from an ACL
in shape.
injury
he's recovering from a knee injury, but
I mean, he still looked way better, and I think a lot of people were expecting him to coming off that injury.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Cook out-snapped him, or had more carries, but Cook only had 13 for 33. I mean, Brees Hall just looked like he's still, even recovering off that injury, had more of that, kind of spark to him.
I was trying to tell people. I mean, I've said it on here on the Daily Show, I think a couple different times. To both Bagdonis, to Jerry, so on and so forth. But I was worried about. I mean, I wasn't. I like Dalvin, but just from what I saw in Minnesota last year,
he just looked a lot more sluggish.
He's in between the tackles. He's not as explosive anymore, and I think that's important to note when you're playing behind an offensive line like the Jets. When you get him in space, he's still like an explosive player. Like, he can still outrun dudes. But when he's not like he was 3 or 4 years ago when he's fully healthy, just in general. And like, you can tell he's lost juice in that respect. And you could tell last night, like, it doesn't help that the Bills defensive line, they're just really good.
Yeah.
Their front seven is one of the best in the league, and so they do a good job of getting push up front. And I think they made that well known. But like, in between the tackles and even sometimes in space last night, Dalvin just doesn't look as explosive or as shifty. Not to say he's not explosive or shifty anymore, but he's definitely, like, if you watch him 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and then you watch him now, they're different. you can tell that he's lost some juice. And I don't think he did have 1,000 rushing yards last year with Minnesota, but he got a shit ton of carries on barely 4 yards per carry. And that doesn't help that Minnesota's offensive line isn't that, because it's not great. It's not terrible. It's not great. But they were also one of the worst run blocking teams in the league last year. The Jets aren't much better, if at all better. And so it's like, that's where it's like, Brees looked really, really good last night, to his credit, all things considered. I mean, he did have that one long 83-yard run.
That definitely helped his stats a little bit.
Final numbers, but it felt like he was also getting like 5 or 6 yards every single time he was touching the ball, at least. And he just looked considerably better than Dalvin last night. I don't know if they're still going to use both backs, but I wonder if there's going to be a little bit different going forward. But Zach Wilson looked tough, and I don't mean tough in like a good way. I mean tough, like that was a tough watch.
I mean, did enough to get the win.
Their defense did enough to get the win. I don't think it was much of it was him, but
he was a starting quarterback and they won. Dang it!
Yeah, I mean, do they trade? I'm going to ask you this: do they trade for a quarterback?
Oh, 100%.
Who do you think they trade for? Or do you think it's either they trade for someone or they sign someone? Like, who do you think?
Yeah, me and some of my roommates were talking about it. Like names like Brissett, Heineke, kind of guys like that. I mean, those are, in my opinion, some of two of the better backups. I mean, it's going to have to be a backup somewhere. Like, I thought about Baker at one point, but at this point, I don't know if the Bucks are going to trade him. But it's, if you're the Jets, you're in your window.
On that offensive line, by the way.
Yeah, like you're in your window now. You sold out to be good for these next couple years. So you gotta have something in there. So they did bring Sam Darnold back.
Is there a funny alternate world where they call up Dallas for Trey Lance?
I don't. I mean, at this point, I can't completely write it off. They're probably going to be picking up the phone for just about any non-starting quarterback at this point.
I wonder if there's a good team that like completely, I don't want to say flames out. I mean, I'd have to look into this deeper. But like a team that we thought would be better than they were, and they trade their quarterback. Again, I'm speaking like, in all likelihood, they're probably just going to sign like Carson Wentz, just call it a day.
Yeah, Carson Wentz was another name that I saw.
Or something of that ilk. It's not going to be like something tremendous, but like, what if the Saints just completely flame out and they're like, yeah, we'll call up and see if we want what we can get for Derek Carr or something like that. I don't know. I'm just speaking in like an alternate universe where this would happen. I don't think it's going to happen at all. But it would be funny if like all of a sudden Trey Lance is now the starting quarterback for the Jets after what we thought Aaron Rodgers would be. But I'd actually kind of I'd root for Trey Lance. I want him to succeed. But all I'm saying,
I definitely think the Jets make a move for someone. I think they have to. They're in their window. I don't think they can afford to just kind of sit back and let Zach Wilson take the reins. I don't think that will end very well. But, I mean, unless you had anything else on this game, I think that's pretty much all I got on this one.
I mean, it sucks for Rodgers.
Yeah.
Like it does. Like I'm genuinely like, I mean, I obviously, again, I don't want anyone to get hurt. But this was like, I was so looking forward to last night because I just wanted to see how he would play. And it sucks that he's now out for the year. And like, I was hoping that I was hoping the Jets would just make it even more competitive in the AFC. Because I just like the parity. I like the chaos.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've seen what Rodgers can be at his best. I've seen it for God knows how long since he's killed my team forever. But yeah, that sucks. That's a bummer. It wasn't a super entertaining game until the end.
Yeah.
Because it's like, as more that game wore on, it's like, oh man, like they're hanging around, like they're not Buffalo's not putting them away, and I felt like every time Buffalo had a chance to put them away, a pick or
like, Josh Allen just made a mistake.
Yeah, or like they would stall out on a drive, and it would be the Jets would get the ball right back. Not that they really had much of an offense to begin with, but their defense meaning the Jets defense, put them in so many positions to succeed at different points last night because of those turnovers that they forced. And good thing at least a couple of different times they were able to capitalize off it. And then obviously it was so cool watching Xavier Gibson, Hard Knocks legend, undrafted rookie from Stephen F. Austin, in his first year NFL game, return a punt for a touchdown. And I don't give a shit about the missed tripping. I saw that after the fact. Don't really care. Because it was just a cool moment.
Yeah.
For really everyone involved, except obviously the Bills. But
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much all my takeaway. Hoping Rodgers has a quick, speedy recovery. If he could be the last time we see Rodgers suit up on an NFL field. Hope it's not the case, but very well could be at his age and given the severity of this injury. But we're almost at 2 hours at this point. I don't think I got anything else to go over from this week 1 slate of games, unless you got anything else you'd like to say real quick, Mr. Hannafin.
Outside of our dumb game on Thursday, which week 2 game are you most excited for?
Oh, week 2 games. I got to double check.
Because I have my pick, but I want to see what you think.
I got to pull up the week 2 slate of games. I mean, obviously not counting the Eagles game. I think that Ravens-Bengals game has a chance to be really good. I'm not thinking the Bengals are going to be as bad as they were week 1. So I think that's probably a game I'm really looking forward to. Another one, Colts-Texans will be a cool one. Richardson versus Stroud.
I actually already bet Houston to win that game.
Already bet, but yeah. Why? What's the game you're most looking forward to?
Kansas City, Jacksonville. Mahomes and Lawrence. This time it's in Jacksonville. I don't know if Kelsey's going to be healthy, but I hope he is, because it's going to be a whole lot of fun. I think that game will be.
Well, I hope so for the Vendetta Fantasy League. That man was like, damn, a third of my budget.
How much did you spend on him again? I think I missed that pick when I was on the stream.
Dude, it was a lot. I think it was like 58, something like that. Trey just kept trying to take him from me, and I got in the bidding war with Trey, and I refused to budge and let him win. And then by the time I did it, I was like, I think I spent too much, but
yeah, he didn't. I'm sure he didn't want him as much. That's why he was.
Well, I think it was the thing where he didn't want me to have the stack because I'd already gotten Mahomes, and that's why I wanted Kelsey so bad, because I wanted the stack of the two. But you know what? We won week 1. That's all that matters.
All right. Who'd you beat?
Chad.
Okay.
The other Eagles fan.
How much did you win by?
I think it was like 30 to 98, something like that.
Okay.
I think the funniest part though is Chickster is currently in last. He was hating on me.
I forgot your
in the power ranking. I mean, I knew nobody was going to agree with pretty much anything I did.
I mean, it's power ranking. Someone's got to come in last. I mean, you even wrote that in your post.
Yeah, I was like, people are going to be mad, but someone's got to go in every spot. I can't put everyone as 1 and 2.
Yeah, remember Milo's fantasy baseball power rankings where he had Trey second to last. He had 11 of 12 or 9 of 10. I can't remember how many, something like that. And Trey was so pissed at him, and it's just I don't think I was also higher on Trey's team, but at the same time, when you do this, your team's gonna look so different.
Yeah, you never know
at the end of the year than it is at the start of it. But yeah, someone's got to come in last. But I thought that was funny, his reaction. But that's me on the outside looking in. So.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that pretty much do it for us. Approaching 2 hours on the stream. I don't think I got anything else NFL related to go over. It was a great week 1 games. Good slate of week 1 games with a couple great games mixed in there. But we're all excited. Football's back, Let us know what you guys thought about week 1. What were some of your favorite moments, favorite plays, favorite games? And, we'll be here next week with more coverage on week 2 games. But for Vendetta Sports Media, this was The Daily Show, September 12th, the week 1 review.
Like and
Jack
subscribe.
Saban. Yep, like, subscribe, comment, share, the whole shebang. And hope you all have a great rest of your day.